Hi, Sarah here. Welcome back. We are doing the decks I've gotten rid of 2020 to 2023, the indie edition. I also did a mass market edition. This time we're looking at the indie decks I've gotten rid of in the past 2-3 years that I've been into tarot. If you're new to tarot and oracle and don't really know what mass market versus indie is, basically mass market decks are decks that have been published via tarot book and deck publishers. So they have warehouses and teams of people who can help them like print and create the decks. So mass market decks typically run between like, I don't know, $15 to $30. Whereas the indie deck creator, they're typically working with the printer themselves to get their deck printed and delivered to their house, and they can mail out the decks to the customers themselves. So independent decks definitely go beyond at least $30 to $35. I would say a good range of indie deck prices is like at least $40 to $70 plus dollars. Yeah, I have bought a lot in the past many years, and I've gotten rid of a lot. I'm at a point in my tarot practice and tarot collecting now that I know pretty well what I like to use and what I like to look at, what I like to reach for, what my style is. I would like to take a look back at the decks that I have gotten rid of to remind myself like, hey, look, you've tried this, it didn't really work. If you get it again, just know that you already had it and you didn't like it. So let's look at the decks I've gotten rid of the past 3 years, Indie Edition. Dun 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 dun, here we are. So the first deck here is the Salmon Advice Oracle. Me personally, I had volumes 3 and 4. They have multiple different volumes on their Etsy shop. I was influenced by Kim-san at Fable's Den. She showed this deck, and what was really cool about this deck was that some of the cards have this panorama. You lay them out and they make a whole big image, a whole big panorama. I was like, wow, this deck is so cool, and it's one of my first decks. I can afford it. Let's see what it's about. It's really cute, but ultimately I just didn't really have an idea or a plan on how to use it. I ultimately, a few years later, just ended up gifting this to someone in the Witchy server that I'm in. It's really cute, and I wish so hard that I had an idea for how to use it that makes sense for me. I hope someone else is enjoying it. Maybe I'll get it again in the future, but for now, me, reminder, this did not work for you the first time around. The Tarot Fauna. This one was an adorable deck, so cute. The animals are so cute. I did a video on this earlier this year because I was getting ready to sell it or give it away because I just was not connected with it. I thought it was so cool when I first got it in like 2020, but throughout the years, I've used it very little. I feel like animal decks just aren't really my thing. I mean, I say that, but I also have like 10 other animal decks that do work for me. But I made a video that kind of showcases like what I did like and didn't like about the deck. Something I did really like was the court cards, which are featured on the side here. I will definitely miss the court cards, but that's not enough for making me want to actually read with it. So I did gift this to someone, and I hope that they're enjoying it. The Badger's Forest Tarot. This was one of my first tarot purchases, and I definitely regret this purchase. It just was hardly usable for me. I got the mini size, which is smaller than even the playing card size. So if you look on the side here, we have the full tarot size, the playing card size, which is already pretty small, and then the mini. The mini size is like literally this small. It was tiny. It was tiny. Even smaller than like the Prismavisions in a tin mini, like this small. So because it was so small, it was like, I am never actually going to use this. So literally within a few weeks, I sold it off on one of the tarot groups on Facebook. Since then, I've already gotten a few other animal themed decks. Like I've got the Tarot Renard and I've got the Way of the Panda Tarot. I'm just not really into foresty decks. As you just saw, I rehomed the Tarot Fauna as well. So this one, honestly, similar vibes, also didn't work for me. The Weaver Tarot Journeyer Edition. This one and the next one, the Threads of Fate Oracle Lumen Edition. I bought these two decks at once from the same person. They were so generous. These decks usually retailed for like $78 new, but this person sold them to me for like $50 each. So I paid only $100 flat for the both of these decks, which was, a really good deal. And I really appreciate that kind of generosity sometimes. This deck was something that I enjoyed using a little bit. Every time I wanted to journal, I pulled a card and journaled about it and read the book and journaled about it and stuff. But then this one just sat on my shelf for like a year or two, and I pulled it off a shelf and tried to do a reading, but it just disconnected so bad that I was like, I am just gonna give it away or sell it. Like, it's not my vibe. So that's what happened with the Weaver Tarot Journeyer Edition. Now, here's the thing. Maybe I'm a clown, but I bought this deck again like a year or two later. But I bought the Shadow Edition, which is like a darker version. So this Journeyer Edition is like a pink medium toned version. I bought the Shadow Edition, which is a more darker toned version. So there's a little bit more contrast between the gold foil and the dark background. But honestly, it was a little bit of FOMO because the creators, Threads of Fate, they were announcing they were going to retire or not print some of their decks. So I was like, oh, let me get the Weaver Tarot because I think I might want to use it again in the future. How many readings have I done with it since I've gotten it like last year? 0. I've done 0 readings with it. I barely pulled it out. So why did I buy this again when I like didn't use it much the first time? I don't know. The Threads of Fate Oracle, like I mentioned, I bought it at the same time that I bought this deck over here. After I finished studying sort of and reading the guidebook for the tarot, I was like, okay, next I'm going to start reading the Oracle, like continue on this 1 card per journal entry, read the guidebook each time kind of thing. And after like a card or 2, I just was not feeling it. So I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to force myself to use it. I'm just going to sell it. Part of why it did not work for me is because the guidebook also mentions like a different herb and a different crystal and a different animal for each card, which I think is really cool. But also when a guidebook mentions things like that, I start feeling a little bit of pressure to learn or to memorize each of those things. And I don't like feeling pressure to know what herb is associated with like paradox, for example. I don't know what herb or essential oil or animal is associated with that, and I don't really care. And I've learned since then that I just don't really vibe with oracles that are just keywords. I think they can be very powerful and very cool for people who like that sort of thing. Just for me, I can't do just keywords because I like structure. Oracle decks just don't have enough structure for me. I prefer decks that have more structure. So this one, just not my vibe. The good news is I did not repurchase an oracle, so I only have the Tarot Shadow Edition. I don't have another version of the oracle, so that's good. The Cosmic Cycles Tarot. I bought this in 2021, I want to say, because people were really gushing about this, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to get it as well and try it. It took me like a year or 2 to get it fulfilled. I think a year and a half for it to finally get fulfilled because there were issues on the creator's end. I think they've been solved now. But I mentioned the delay because that delay was a big frustration for me. Just because within like a few months after me making that initial purchase in January of like 2021, I already knew that I kind of shouldn't have gotten the deck. I succumbed to FOMO. I succumbed to like peer pressure. Other people liked the deck, so maybe I would like it too. I really didn't need to buy it. And it cost like $50. Indie decks are not cheap. This one was like $50 or $60. I also made a video showcasing this deck just to remind myself why I got rid of it. It's a really pretty deck though. It's really profound and like the art is really good. The colors are beautiful. It's very cozy, but ultimately I realized that I don't vibe with decks that are very modern and very like specific, because when the situation is very specific, I have trouble applying the message or the energy of the reading of the card to like the current reading. For example, let's say this 2 of Swords here. This person seems to be caught between 2 fighting parents. So there is that energy of being in a crossroads. But now when I pull that in a reading, I'm only going to see like child of divorced parents. I'm not going to see like 2 of Swords meaning. So these modern like specific meanings were really just catching in my mind and making it hard for me to enjoy like the essence of the card. So I think I need cards and decks that are a little bit more open in their interpretation and not so specific for me to appreciate them. But yeah, the colors are absolutely pretty, and again, I wish I had a tarot library like available so I could just use this deck and return it instead of the commitment of having to own the deck and keep it. So Cosmic Cycles Tarot just wasn't my vibe, had to go. The Faunabelle Tarot. I specifically remember around the time that I found out about this deck on Kickstarter, there was some videos and some trends about inner child work, or maybe at that time I learned about inner child work for like the first time. The Faunabelle Tarot was what I thought was going to be another inner child sort of deck because, as you can see, it's just very childish and very cute, silly, simple, and a bit childish. But when I got the deck, I was disappointed because, for example, the court cards are just these characters, these animals in a frame. There's not really any indication of what they are or what they represent or what they mean or what they're doing. And this is like my gripe about decks that do court cards like this. Like when they just show this person or this character being a royal monarch, like I don't know how I'm supposed to apply that to my readings. That doesn't give me anything to work off of. So I really am averse to decks that do court cards like this. Beyond that, the cards are not numbered, so it can be a little bit difficult to see at a glance like what the card is. For example, this looks like the 6 of Swords, but You'd have to count the feathers to know how many swords. Over here, it looks like a 6 of pentacles. Since this is themed way more towards children, I feel like this was more like a child's deck and not really an inner child sort of deck. So I sold this off immediately after I received the Kickstarter. I'm sure that person is enjoying it a lot more than I am with their children. But yeah, that was a lesson learned about being mindful of decks. Just because they seem like they're silly and young doesn't mean they're actually the vibe for me. The Prison Tarot by Liz Landis. This is available on Etsy. The version I'm showing here in this corner is the first edition with the white backs. I believe that the current editions now have black backs. I thought this deck was so pretty. I'm such a sucker for rainbows, and I feel like I've said this a lot of times on my channel. I am a sucker for rainbows. When I see color, when I see gradients, when I see the progression of red to blue, red to green, it just makes my eyes so happy. So that's why I was attracted to this deck. When I got it, I realized I just have trouble reading with it because these figures and these cards, they just look like they're crystals. They look like they're crystallized, which, I mean, that's the vibe of the deck. It's a prison tarot. They're like crystals. But it just wasn't for me. I just didn't really feel connected with it. For some reason that I just can't really explain or understand, it just wasn't connecting with me. So I sold this, and yeah, that's the end of that. The Wild Whiskers Oracle. So this one is being sold on Etsy. And actually, fun fact, when I first got this deck, I believe I got a first edition or something because the cardstock on that initial edition was so bad. As you can see, the cards have this black background, and the card backs are also black as well. When I got the deck, the cardstock was so cheap that it was chipped all over. It was chipped all over either before or after I shuffled it a little bit. So I had to edge the deck in a dark magenta color to hide the fact that the cardstock was literally peeling off of the edges and some of the backs just from light shuffling. So that was already pretty annoying. That was really cheap cardstock for the amount that I paid for it. This was another deck that I enjoyed for the concept, but I just don't use much in practicality. There's a animal for each card. There's a cute little alliteration adjective for each animal. There's 3 keywords or traits associated. And there's even a little mantra or a little spell. I just think that's so cool. And I was like, I'm so going to use this. It's going to make me feel so witchy and so cool. And I ended up not using it. I just don't use things like this. I'm so mad because my fantasy self totally does things like this. My fantasy self is so witchy and does these things, and my real self literally does not. I really want to have this deck again and try it out again, but as my past experience goes, I really didn't use it as much. So, so sad. The Wild Whiskers Oracle. Tarot in Space. This one is a happy story. This one I basically sold off because there is a new edition that came out earlier this year or last year, and I like the new edition a lot more. I had the previous edition for a year or two and I enjoyed it a lot. So when the new edition came out, I was kind of ready to jump ship though. This is what the new edition looks like here. On the left side is the old edition. On the right side is a new edition. And I did a video comparing the two, what they look like here. So you can see that the art has been updated a lot. The creator's art has just improved so much. The shading and the techniques used, there's so much improvement here. So that's kind of a happy story. I sold off the previous edition in favor of the new edition. The 5 Cent Tarot. This one is a really cool deck. This is another one that my fantasy self enjoys, but my real self literally does not use. The idea of having multiple keywords upright and reverse for each card is so cool. Reverse this card and you see 3 different words on it. And the fact that the words are all interwoven into the cards like this is so cool. But I didn't actually use it. I found the cards a bit too busy for my taste. I actually lent this to a friend, and then I decided later on, hey, friend, do you want to just keep the deck? I don't even need it back. Happy birthday. So that's what happened with this deck. Just a bit overwhelming for my taste, and I'm not into keywords as much as I thought I would be. The Inner Child Oracle by originally called 7 Realms Designs, but now her Etsy shop looks like it's called Amanda Lynn Aisling. This one looks like it's out of print. Since she was selling this via Etsy, that's why I'm putting it in the independent edition presentation. However, I do think that she's coming out with this deck mass market because if you look at her Instagram, Amanda Lynn Aisling, you'll look at her link in bio, there's actually a link to a Penguin Random House site. So I think this deck is actually coming out mass market in the future. I had this deck for some time, and because it was called Inner Child Oracle, I thought I would be able to use it to talk to my inner child, because at the time I was like learning about what inner child work was, and I was like, oh boy, this is going to help me with my inner child stuff like everybody else is saying. What this deck features is a really cool, a really beautiful collage art on the top, and then a nice little affirmational message and guidance on the bottom here. However, I didn't find it too applicable to my own inner child or to anything childish in particular. And also, I just am not really into collage art. I think it's really pretty to look at, but I find myself not really looking at it or admiring it very much. So I was like, yeah, not my vibe. I gifted it to someone else in my area. So this is the Inner Child Oracle. Not my vibe, just went away. The Ink Witch Tarot. This one personally annoyed me a little bit as well. The sepia tones, kind of monochromatic look is really cool. I think decks with like very cohesive color palettes are really cool and very easy to look at. But what annoyed me about this deck was that the cards didn't seem super consistent. This is probably because I don't really identify as a witch, so I don't consider myself very witchy or aligned with witchy things or ideas. So that's why a lot of things like foresty things, animals, magic, they don't really connect with me. And this deck just felt a little bit all over the place. There was some mythology references from different mythologies, and then there were some modern scenes, and then there were some cards that didn't even have people. I just felt really confused. It just did not feel cohesive for me. What really annoyed me, for example, was the Knight of Wands. As I've learned now from watching many walkthroughs and reviews of this deck that this is meant to be like someone taking a selfie. It's very brazen. But the thing is, like, because that's such a specific situation, I don't know how I'm going to read that in any other context besides like some dude taking a selfie in the mirror. And to point out other inconsistencies in the deck, like the Page of Wands here is a person, but the King of Wands is an animal. And this Page of Cups is this fish, so it's an animal, not a person. This King of Cups is a person, but they're like in the far background. So I didn't like the inconsistencies in the court cards that way. I feel like, I don't know, just be more consistent. But I mean, that's the artist style. I'm just saying why it didn't work for me. The inconsistencies just were not doing it for me. So Ink Witch Tarot, not my vibe. The Self-Love Tarot, this one was hard to let go of because it had dark navy blue backs, and I'm just such a sucker for navy blue as a color. Navy blue, dark purples, like those are my favorite colors, and the blues in this deck were so beautiful. And this deck had gold foiling, so it was so pretty. Gosh, it was so pretty. I thought the Empress card was so cool and honestly so funny. Like, it's just so different from a typical Empress card. But ultimately, what did it in for me for this deck was the fact that the cardstock was so crappy. I paid $55+ for this deck, and the cardstock felt as cheap or as thin as like a mass market deck, as like a $25 deck. And I was like, I paid $55 for this. Also, the cards, I guess like art themselves, just did not really do it for me. Basically just not really my vibe either. I think it's a cool deck, cool concept, really pretty colors, but ultimately just not really my vibe. The Blooming Cat Tarot. I backed this on Kickstarter last year, maybe, and it was delivered like later on that year or this year or something. This one, cool idea, but ultimately I decided I just only have one cat deck that I care about, and it's the Mystical Cats Tarot. This one is a really cute cat deck, but something I didn't like about it was how much like empty space there was in the cards. Like the chariot here, like here's a chariot, but then there's so much empty space down here that's, even though it's being covered in leaves, it just felt a little bit like bare for me. And that's the art style, you know? So that art style just didn't really work for me. I gifted this to someone else in the Witchy server, so I hope that she's enjoying it more than I did. This deck also includes like 12 cards for the different astrology signs, the different zodiac signs, so that's a cool little feature. I just didn't use them as much as I thought I would. And that's a tangent. I think I just have to remember or realize that I'm just not going to use astrology decks or concepts as much as I thought I would. Like maybe I'll have them in a book or literally just write them on my own notebook, but to have actual cards or decks based off of astrology just is not working for me. I'm not using them as much as I thought I would. The Winter Wait Santa's Helpers Tarot. This is a Christmas themed or a holiday themed deck. I got this for a similar reason that I got the Halloween Tarot, which was listed in my mass market video. I do like the vibes of Christmas, even though in Southern California we don't get snow at all. We just get Christmas decorations and a whole lot of commercialization. But I was like, oh, this deck would be so cute, so thematic for Christmas, for the holidays. and I've done a couple readings with it, but ultimately it just did not really connect with me. I also realized that I'm just not really into Rider-Waite-Smith clones. I don't want more decks that are just straight up the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery copy pasted with like changes to the outfits or the backgrounds. Like I want something new and unique. I have seen the Yuletide Tarot as another alternative for a Christmas themed deck, but I also just am not really into seasonal decks anymore. I don't really get into the changing of the seasons and different vibes of the holidays, so it doesn't make sense for me to have decks that I would only want to use seasonally or for the holidays. I just don't need those kinds of decks in my life. The Considerate Cat Tarot, this one was so cute. Similar to what I said before, there's only one cat deck that works for me right now, and it's the Mystical Cats Tarot. This deck has a really sweet premise. The cats here are based off of the different foster cats or shelter cats that the creators have worked with. I ended up gifting this deck to another friend who likes cats a lot, and I feel like the messages in the guidebook were really nurturing and just what she needed to hear. But for me, just did not really work for me. I also have personal gripes with this font. Like the tall letters, the capital letters, and the lowercase letters have just such a disparity. It's kind of a cute style choice, but also it is a little bit hard to read sometimes, but it's really cute. Also, the court cards in this deck just were not doing it for me. Looking at the Mother and the Father of Cups here, like, this does not tell me anything about what the court card is supposed to mean. And, you know, like I mentioned before, just that's my gripe about court cards sometimes. Like, they don't actually feature the court cards doing anything. They're just sitting there surrounded by stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what this means. Thanks anyway. The Little Wizard's Tarot by Push Kitty. This creator does really cute art. I really admire how many decks she's able to create and how much she's able to draw all of these. Making art is amazing. I was into Harry Potter when I was younger. I wasn't a diehard fan like some other people were, but I had my fair share of geekery in Harry Potter. This deck does not come with a guidebook, so there are a few cards that I didn't know who they were. I feel like if you are a diehard fan of the movies and maybe any extra canon material, you would understand. But for me, there were just a few characters that I forgot who they were, and not knowing who they were was gonna bug me. Also, I just am not really into Harry Potter as much anymore. I feel like that phase of my life has passed on. I'm just gonna leave that Harry Potter diehard phase in like the teenage years and just leave it at that. So I didn't really need a deck of Harry Potter anymore. I gifted this to someone else who is a diehard Potter fan, so hope that she's enjoying it more than I am. I will say these Push Kitty decks are also really pricey. They're like $60 to $80, so they're on the higher side of indie deck pricing that I've seen. The Moon Crystal Tarot, I did a video about this as well before I sold it because I just wanted to remind myself why I did not like this deck. Basically, it is another Rider-Waite-Smith clone, and as I mentioned before, I'm not into Rider-Waite-Smith clones. I just want decks that have unique art, just new art in situations and scenes to look at. One of my gripes from this deck was that the guidebook did not mention who the characters were. I think that can partly be a licensing thing though, so I can understand like why creators don't want to actually name it, so I understand. I'm still annoyed about it. I also didn't like how the guidebook only mentioned like literally a couple sentences for each minor arcana. Like I paid $75 for this deck and the guidebook is like so skimpy, and it's just a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, so I wanted it to work so badly. It's really pretty visually, just not my vibe. And I paid $75 for this. I will not pay $75 for a deck again. It is so pricey. The Walking Meditation Tarot. This one I backed on Kickstarter like last year, and after it arrived, it definitely was not for me. The premise of this deck is that the creator was inspired by the daily walks that they take, and they find walking very meditative, which is a cool concept. But what I really didn't like about this deck was that it seems like there's some sort of filter or something on the cards that makes them look kind of blurry or over sharpened or something. And it just was so jarring to me. I feel like the photos would have been fine without the extra like filter or something added on. So I sold that off right away. I think the Super Lunaris Tarot, I've never seen it in person, but I think that might have the same like filter-ish effect where it's like kind of blurry or looking painted or something. I don't know, but I don't like it. When I looked at this, I had a hard time connecting with it. So, and also I do have another deck that already works for me. I have the Naturescapes Tarot, which is another deck of landscapes and naturey scenes. So I feel like that deck already worked for me. I didn't need another one just like it. The Out of Hand Tarot by Jamie Sawyer. So this one I also backed on Kickstarter last year, 2022. I have her Pocket of Peers tarot, which I also don't use very much. But when I saw that this deck was coming out, I was so excited because it looked so cool. This deck features just hands. So no like people faces, just hands and people doing things. And I thought that concept was so cool. That is really cool. When I got it in, I just ended up not using it. And similar thing to what I said with the Cosmic Cycles Tarot, I think it's because some of the scenes are just so specific. And I think that's my own mental barrier with modern decks. When the scenes are so specific, I have a hard time understanding the energy and trying to extrapolate that energy to the situation of the reading that I'm looking for, that I'm reading for. So I just can't do modern decks anymore, I guess, because they just can't have specific scenes because then I can't read with them. But as a deck itself, it is so pretty. And I would recommend this as like a study deck if you're interested in actually studying tarot and like learning the meanings. I just can't actually do readings with it. So unfortunately, that's my gripe with the out of hand tarot. The Perspective Glass Oracle. I bought the second hand from someone in the Philippines, and this one I did not understand at all. I should have saved my money and not bought this deck, but I was curious and I wanted to buy from the Philippines, so I gave it a shot. This deck features like different traits and things about the Enneagrams, the, types 1 through 9, the Enneagrams. So these cards, they're reversible. So on the one hand, you have the message on the bottom here, and this is what the card looks like. You can flip it upside down. There's another message, and the image will be flipped upside down as well. The guidebook for this did not help me understand the deck anymore, and the messages themselves did not understand the message anymore. Like one of the messages here says, "You little devil, you." I don't know how that's going to apply to my life. I don't know how I would use that in a reading. Also, I felt like the upright and the reverse messages didn't really connect with me either. Like, appreciate the magic in the ordinary, and then reverse that. You little devil, you. On first glance, I don't really know how those connect to each other and why they're on the same card and like consider it a reversal of each other. So this deck did not work for me. I wish I saved my money, but on the bright side, I did get to gift it to a friend nearby, and she's already used it a lot more than I have. So I'm glad that someone's getting use out of it because it's not me. The Rain Shadow Tarot, this is a new deck that I literally just got like this past month. It was fulfilled on Kickstarter this year, 2023. I don't know why I backed it. I probably backed it because I thought it was really pretty, but looking at the art in person, it's just not my vibe. There's a certain like earthy, I want to say hippie, but maybe that's not the right word, just an earthy energy to this deck, which is a cool energy, but it's not my type. I am gonna sell it. It's in the process of being sold right now. Shouldn't have backed it. Don't know what I was thinking. The Rain Shadow Tarot. And this one, I bought this like in 2020, but this is at the end because I am recently deciding to sell this as well because it's just not really my vibe. This was one of the first Kickstarters that I backed in 2020. I remember that the Kickstarter blew up so big. It was like all over the ads everywhere, and there were so many people backing it. I was like, oh, this is such a pretty deck. And it really is. Even though this is an oracle deck, this is also modeled after the tarot system. So there's still 22 major arcana, and there's still 4 suits, ace through 10 of each suit. The court cards for the suits have all been renamed and put into a separate suit, like the suit of spirit or something. I held onto this deck for 2-3 years, hoping that I would one day study it and finally be able to use it in readings after I studied it. I bought the big book as well, and I started reading it earlier this year, finally. But what I found as I read the book was that some of the cards made sense for me, and some of the cards just made me kind of annoyed. I don't like when decks are like the Swan. Okay, so for example, the High Priestess is correlated with the Swan. I tend to not like decks that do things like this, where it just tells me what the Swan is supposed to mean. Like, what is the Swan doing? What are we doing with the Swan? Like, I don't know why I have to remember like exactly what the Swan means. And as I continued reading on through the minor arcana, I just felt like the images, the interpretations, I guess, just made less sense to me personally. So I realized that even though this is an oracle deck and is trying to go its own way, I would forever be trying to stick the Rider-Waite-Smith system on this deck, and I just don't think I should be forcing this to be Rider-Waite-Smith, I also thought I would get more into the idea of past lives and past life readings and past life studying, because even though I don't really believe in past lives, the concept is really interesting to me, but I don't know if this is a deck for me. The major arcana alone makes you want to keep the deck, but I could do without the minor arcana. So that's my gripe with the Cosma Visions Oracle. That one might go bye-bye. So that's 24 indie decks, dude, gone bye-bye over the past 2-3 years. God, that's so much money I spent and so much time spent giving away and shipping off these decks. So those are the indie decks that I've sold and gotten rid of the past 3 years. God, that is a lot of decks that I've just gotten rid of. So between this video and the other video, that's a total of like 40-ish decks that I've gotten rid of. My collection is still at like 50 or 60 decks, but definitely it makes me just want to buy less. This year, I'm definitely committed to buying even less because, like I said in the beginning, I know exactly what I want. I know more my style. I want to appreciate the decks that I do have. And that's why I'm doing the tarot practice series and just trying to think of more ideas to use the decks that I do have on video and show my experiences with those decks. So after looking at all these decks, the takeaway here is to be mindful of how much I consume YouTube and how much I want to buy a deck just because other people online on Facebook or on YouTube are already talking about it. So this is a reminder to myself and to you, if you need this reminder, that make sure you want a deck because you genuinely want it and you think it would work for you, not because you see 10 other people talking about it and you think you want it as well. Also, if you're curious on how or where I would get rid of decks, basically I would sell them on buy-sell groups on Facebook. There's a lot of tarot buy-sell groups on there. Sometimes I might also gift a deck to people in the Sass Witches community server that I'm in, the Discord server. And sometimes I might sell or gift them to people in my local area because I do have a few tarot nerd friends in the area who also like tarot and oracle, so I might gift it to them as well. I will say, if you're not ready to go through the work of actually like shipping out a deck and getting rid of it and mentally doing that work, hold off on buying a deck until you're ready to do that work of getting rid of it. It's easier to buy things and bring them in than to actually get rid of them. Sometimes waiting for a deck to be sold off and like getting that whole process started is such a pain. Let's slow down on the buying. Let's slow down on the buying, especially if you know it's not going to work for you. So that's all the indie decks I've gotten rid of in the past 2-3 years. If you have any of these and or if you've gotten rid of any of these, I would also love to hear why. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the mass market version where I talk about the 20-ish mass market decks I've also rehomed. And with that, that's all I got for you today. So thanks for watching. Bye!